Thank you, guys. That was amazing. What an amazing set. Um, yeah, I think I can do this. I was looking at all the stuff up here. I got a little distracted because I saw another cup and then a piece of paper that Diane took away. Thank you, Diane, for doing that. And years ago when I started preaching, that would have never worked. I would have never had the room, with all that stuff up here because, I'd get up here, I'd get up there. You remember when I had books. I mean, I had my big theology book over here and the book I was reading and the Bible and all my stuff, had to have all those books and stuff up here so I could, teach from them. And I ended up teaching like an hour and a half, preaching an hour and a half, and you don't realize that time goes by. You remember that. Um, she definitely remembers that part. So yeah, thankfully for you guys, I've learned a few things, maybe just a few things, and some ways to consolidate some of that. So, it's been a really great week. A lot of you have been involved in the weekend, with our trunk or treat and the yard sale that we had yesterday, which turned out fantastic. And I didn't have much to do with that at all. It was, a bunch of people that are way smarter than I am, more efficient than I am, and they did just an absolutely fantastic job. So, but it has been a busy week, in terms of preparation. If you guys don't know, Pastor Russ is gone to actually celebrate his dad's retirement with him, and they're having a service this morning at his dad's church to honor that retirement. Pastor Russ is going to be speaking. He's going to be honoring his dad in that way, so we want to lift him up as well and be thinking about him, be thinking about them as they do that. Those are I think bittersweet times where it's a great thing, but you also it's a huge going to be a huge change in his dad's life to actually try and retire. So just be praying for them. But I know they're going to have a good time, and it'll be a great moment, bonding time for them. So, and with that said, again, talking about preparation, one of the things that actually what we're going to be talking about this morning is what got me through this week, and that's hope. That's hope. And you see right there, hope anchors the soul. That's Hebrews 6:19. That's where we're going to be. We're going to be hovering around that verse and some other verses. There are 400 plus verses on hope all through the Scripture. And I was just intrigued by that. And no, we're not going to do all 400 today. We're not going to teach and really expound on all 400. I don't know how close to that we'll get, but I'm blown away by that because of the way we use the word hope. I'm just blown away by the way that the Scripture, uses hope and the way we use that word and how important it must be. When God repeats things, it's important. It's all important. His word is important. But when he repeats things, we probably need to pay close attention, very close attention to that. And uses that word hope so many times. But, I wonder what we would say if someone just asked us out of the blue without thinking about it. What is hope? What does that really mean? How do you define hope? On the way to school, we get a late start on the way to school. Man, I really hope that red light turns green. I really hope that person who's driving the speed limit gets out of my way so that I can go by, so I can get my kids to school on time, right? I really hope the Atlanta Falcons win another football game. I mean, but it's uncertain, right? It's uncertain. I hope you like my cooking, my family. I hope you like my cooking. I hope, these things, but it's uncertain, Those things really can't be counted on, but we use that word, right? Think about yourself. How many times, this past week, did you use the word hope? I hope, I hope this, or I hope that. I hope, this happens. I hope that happens. But is that really going to change anything? It's not going to change anything. It's not going to turn the light green, It's not going to, make it go faster. It's not going to magically change the situation. The circumstance is not, it's not magic, but we use the word hope. I hope this happens. What we really mean is we wish that it would happen. Or that's our desire. That's what we want to have happen. But whether it does or not is a totally different thing, right? But we use that word. That's how we use it. And that's sometimes how we build our view of things. It's how we build our attitude. When we use that word hope, when we use it like that. So we want to go toward a definition of hope. And that way it's really not, it's really just wishful thinking. That's not real hope. The other thing that hope is not, and I want to say this the right way, and I want to say it carefully, is optimism. Hope is not optimism. Now, optimism is great. Optimism is great, but optimism is more psychological. The hope that we're going to talk about is theological. Okay, did you hear what I said? Optimism is psychological. Hope is theological. Biblical hope is theological. It is far beyond optimism. Why do I say that? Is it bad to be an optimist? Absolutely not. It's not bad to be an optimist, but optimism has potential. Optimism has potential if we view that as hope. If we take optimism and put it in the same category, if we give it the same, let it carry the same weight as biblical hope, we're going to be deceived. We're going to be let down. Why? Because optimism says when something goes wrong, has the potential to say when something goes wrong, something's bad. Oh, it's not bad. I can just, psychologically shake this out in my mind and just say it's not really bad. You know what I'm saying? It's not a bad thing. I don't have to think that way. It's a good thing. It's not happening. It's, has potential. Optimism has potential if we rely on it. So get what I'm saying, because I'm not putting down optimism. We should be optimistic, but we can't rely on optimism. We can't give it the weight. We can't give it the gravity. And it doesn't have the gravity that hope has. Have you ever been in a situation? Have you ever had something happen where all you could really say, the truth is, it's bad? Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. Optimism, like I said, says that, this situation is not bad. I can ignore it. Maybe I can ignore it and it'll go away. Even though the situation is bad, if I'm optimistic, it will change. But that's treating it like magic, right? That's not treating it fairly. Because sometimes it's just bad. The situation, the circumstance is just bad. Hope is different. Because hope says, even though it's bad, I'm looking forward to something I am sure of. Something else. Even though the situation is what it is. That can be so many things, and I hope you're thinking about that. I hope you're thinking about what I'm saying. And again, optimism is a great thing, and I consider myself an optimist as opposed to a pessimist. So optimism is a great thing, but it has to be put in the right place. Okay, it has to be given the right place, and we have to do that. We have to understand again that optimism is psychological. Hope is theological. Hope does something. Hope has power, and that's what we're going to get into. We're going to talk about the power that hope has. The real power that optimism doesn't have, but hope has to change the way that we see things. A lot of times, our wishful thinking can be out of touch with reality. Like I said, the red light, green light thing. Wanting the light to turn, wishing that the light would turn green is not going to turn it green. If you leave late, your chances are you're going to get there late. You know what I mean? That's, unless you can just, dodge in and out of traffic without the cops seeing you and stopping you, well, you're probably going to get there late. That's just the way it is. You can't really make up time, and you can't wish it to go backwards. Although it did go back last night, didn't it? Yeah, we won't get that in here. Don't mess up my stuff. We don't want to do that. But nobody's complaining about it, So that extra hour, right? Felt good. I actually felt late. I don't know about you guys, but, I bounced up, an hour early. My body just woke up, and I was like, oh, man, I really need to try to go back to sleep, but it really didn't happen. So that's, oh, well, I felt late, but I wasn't late. So that's, so there we go. But, with hope, the situation can be bad. The situation can hurt, doesn't it? It hurts. Sometimes it's scary. Any of those words, sometimes it's painful. Sometimes the situation is lonely. Sometimes you can't see the outcome. Sometimes it looks hopeless. And that's the reality of the situation. And optimism won't make that go away. Optimism is not going to make that change. It's not going to change the circumstance. But hope has the power to change the way we see it and then change the way we deal with it. Then there's expectant hope. There's the wishful thinking, and now we expect things. I mean, if who has a garden? Yeah, you have gardens. Okay, well, if you plant some seeds, right, and water it, you expect, you hope, you have an expectant hope that, something should come up, right? I mean, that's a hope that's, it's an expectant hope. It's not certain, but it's at least in touch with reality, right? I mean, if I put gas in the car, if it's almost out, I put gas in the car, well, I'm going to expect it to run for 300 plus miles on a full tank of gas. I mean, that's what it says it's going to do. That's what that's what it says, like, on the screen. It's, we're good for 300 miles, So, I can kind of expect that, right? That's an expectation within reality. So that's an expectant hope. I hope this happens. I hope that happens. And it should. It should. But now, if I go home and I'm thinking about this and I say, man, I really hope that, tomorrow a bunch of vegetables, sprout up in the grass. Well, kind of got a problem because I really didn't sow any. I didn't really sow any seeds, so I can't really expect that to happen, right? Expecting mothers. You're expecting, right? That's why they call it that. You have an expectant hope. You're expecting a baby. There's a baby growing inside you, and that's just such a wonderful thing, and you have that expectation. You have that hope, right? And you talk about it as such. You talk about it that way. This is what's happening. And that's awesome. That's an expectant hope. So those things are very true forms of hope, but it's still not getting down to the theological hope. It's not there yet. It's been said that you can go probably weeks without food, maybe weeks without food, maybe a week. I don't know. Some of us maybe longer, some of us not so long. I don't know if I can, but I like food. You can go a good while without food. You can go maybe days without water. Some of you can probably even go minutes without breath. I don't know. I don't know how long I could hold my breath. I don't want to try it right now, but I don't want to pass out. But some of us could probably go minutes without breath, right? You can hold your breath for a little bit. But you can't go 5 seconds without hope. You hear what I just said? You can't go 5 seconds without hope. Whether you realize it or not, there is something in you that makes you hope to keep going. Whatever it is, whether you realize it or not, you have an expectation of a future. Even if it's 10 minutes, an hour into the future, you have an expectation that keeps you moving. Hope has power. It has power. Any kind of hope has power. Has power to cause us to think in certain ways. I was reading a story about a time, and it was back in the 90s, and I don't know if you guys had this here, but we didn't in the small towns. We didn't. It wasn't really like this, but in the big cities, they had a program where for kids who were out of school for a long period of time because of medical reasons, they would have people, teachers that would be able to go to the hospital. If the kids were in the hospital for, like I said, for a long period of time and couldn't leave the hospital, they would go to them and they would teach them, what I'm saying? So they wouldn't get so behind on their work. They had the expectation of getting out at some time. They didn't want to get behind on their work. They wanted to keep them learning so they didn't have so much to catch up on, which was a really neat program. And I don't know if they had that here. I'm not sure. But whatever the case, there was a situation I read about a little boy who was in the hospital, a young man, student age, junior high student age, who had been burned very badly and all over his body. And he was in critical condition for a long time. And for those of you who know about burns, burns can be, it's a thick set of woods to come through with everything involved with infection and that kind of thing. So that was the case. Well, the person that they sent over from the school to meet with this boy had no idea that he had been burned so badly. She didn't know the condition of him, or anything like that, but she was going to go teach him some nouns and verbs. You know, those are important things. So she was going to teach him about nouns and verbs, and she goes in, and of course she's like staggered, by the sight of this young man who was very quiet, hadn't spoken to anybody for a while, and she just, taught him the nouns and verbs and felt like she was just going through the motions because he didn't really have much of a reaction to it. Didn't say much, didn't show, really any interest that she knew of. So she just kind of felt like, she really hadn't done a lot of good in that first visit, just one visit. And a week later, when she comes back, she's met by some of the nurses that were caring for him. And they said, "What did you do to that kid?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry." She's starting to apologize. No. After you left, he started talking again. He started talking. He started smiling and started interacting. "What'd you do to him?" She said, "I just taught him about nouns and verbs." So she asks him, what happened? She said, they told me that you had been, you've been quiet and things like that. And what happened? He said, "I lost all hope. I lost hope." But he said, "There's no way the school would send you to teach me about nouns and verbs if I wasn't going to make it." Hope. Expectant hope. He had hope. And it revived him. It rejuvenated him. That's the power of hope. So we can't live without it. We cannot live without it. And in fact, we know that if anyone is hopeless, and I can honestly say that in large view, I've never been hopeless. I've never been without hope. I've never been, maybe in some circumstances, in different circumstances, like individual circumstances, without hope. And maybe a lot of us feel that way this morning. Maybe, it's a relationship, it's a circumstance with somebody else, it's a job, at school, testing and subjects that we deal with that are very hard to deal with, in school. Maybe we feel hopeless. We feel hopeless. Our grades or our jobs, relationships with our spouse, our kids, all those things. In those different circumstances can feel hopeless. We can feel hopeless and not see the future, not see a future. We come to that. And maybe not life as a whole, again, being hopeless, but just those different circumstances. And there are a lot of reasons for that. There are a lot of reasons that we find ourselves hopeless, like feeling alone. Life is out of control, not feeling purpose, experiencing grief. What about chains? What about habits that are destructive? What about when we come to a place where we're in bondage to something that we're trying to get out of, and we fall again and again and again, and we start to feel hopeless. We feel hopeless that it's ever going to change, that we're ever going to break free. And then there's a voice. There's a voice that comes and tells us, "You're going to fall again. It's not going to get any better." That's Satan's voice, isn't it? That's not God's voice. That's his voice. So we have to ask a question. Wait a second. Who said that? God didn't say that. God did not say that. Because he tells us that we have encouragement. Through the scriptures, we find hope. Paul says that, as a matter of fact. And we're going to get to the verses that we're doing in just a moment. But he says, that we may have hope through endurance and through the encouragement from the scriptures. Not the encouragement from our circumstances or from anything else that we think is going to work, but the encouragement from the scriptures. That's where we find it, right? A lot of things can cause us hopelessness. And the main reason for hopelessness in our society, in our culture, not just as individuals, not individuals in the church, but, well, let me ask you, how many of you have ever looked around the culture or have looked around lately, by news or social media or wherever, and could honestly say, wow, things look hopeless? Yeah. Yes, you can honestly look and see that, in some part, in some way, at some time we've said, maybe not all of us, but some of us have said, things look hopeless. In the culture, it looks hopeless. And then as individuals, we face those things in our personal lives. But I came across something because, I wondered why I felt that way. I wondered why it is that, that I came across, a time, where I would actually say, wow, the culture actually looks hopeless. It looks hopeless with what's happening, with how people are dividing and how, the lines are so clearly drawn and it's like there's no unity. And I mean, a million things you can list. And all of us can be thinking about things. If you've ever looked around and you've said, wow, things kind of look hopeless, you can look around and you can think of whatever things, that would cause that. But Job, it's amazing in the 8th chapter of Job, when one of Job's friends is talking, he says this, he says, those who forget, and this is Job chapter 8:13. You don't have to turn there, but he says this, those who forget God have no hope. That is the number one cause of hopelessness. Those who forget God have no hope. It's very possible that our culture as a whole, not the church, has forgotten God. What happens? I thought about what happens. What does that look like? What does it look like when a culture, forgets God? What does it look like when they do that? It gets mixed up, right? When a culture forgets God, when that happens, the culture idolizes wealth. We minimize truth, or the culture minimizes truth. Trivialize life. Desensitize conscience. The culture secularizes education, polarizes politics, right? Liberalizes morals. And I'm just being honest here. These are just things that, things I think about. Popularizes immorality, immoral behavior, crime, violence through TV, social media, games. Glamorize sin. A culture that has forgotten God glamorizes sin. And honestly, demonizes biblical Christians. A culture that has forgotten God demonizes the church. And though this word gets used a lot, a culture that has forgotten God marginalizes God. It can look pretty bleak, can't it? It can. We think, wow, what is there? What can we do? What can we do? It feels like we're not making a difference, but how do we move next? What's our motivation? Hebrews chapter 6. And there's a lot in this chapter. There's a whole lot in this chapter that goes along with what we're talking about. But I'm gonna read some so that we get a bit of a context here. But there's a couple of topics I'm not going to touch. I mean, Hebrews 6 is that chapter. If you're familiar with the book of Hebrews, and Hebrews, let me say, is a very unique book. It's very unique because it takes basically the Old Testament moral law and the concept of the priesthood, and it brings it into the person of Jesus Christ. It takes it from a concept to a person. It takes the concept of being sprinkled with blood for the forgiveness of sin and puts that in a person, in the person, and the finished work of Jesus Christ, where his blood was shed. So Hebrews is a very unique book in the way that it's written and the subjects that it deals with. But we're going to read verses 13 through 19 right now. For when God made a promise to Abraham, since he had no greater to swear by, he swore by himself. I will indeed bless you, and I will greatly multiply you. He couldn't make the agreement, okay, when he gave the promise. He couldn't make the agreement between he and Abraham. It wasn't even, because Abraham is human. Abraham it was a man, you know what I'm saying, just like me. He's a person, just like us. He was a sinful person, a person who God had to redeem. So he didn't have that power. God swore by himself. That's a good thing. That's a good thing because that makes his grace possible. It makes it depend on him and not you. So we thank God for his grace. He says, and so, after waiting patiently, Abraham obtained promise, for people swear by something greater than themselves. Wow. I swear if you don't clean your room. Yeah, we swear by someone greater than ourselves, right? People swear by something greater than themselves. And for them, a confirming oath ends every dispute. We make an oath because God wanted to show his unchangeable purpose even more clearly to the heirs of the promise. And I thank God I'm an heir to the promise. You're an heir of the promise. He guaranteed it with an oath so that through two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie. You ever wonder what it's impossible for God to do, what God can't do? He cannot deny himself, and he cannot lie. God can't lie. It is impossible for him to lie, otherwise he would not be God. Be thankful for that. Think about the magnitude of that. Let that weigh on you. It's impossible for God to lie. We who have, so that through the two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement in order to seize the hope before us. To seize the hope before us. Strong encouragement to seize the hope before us. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul. Now, what does an anchor do? Pretty important piece, I'm thinking. I'm not the expert on ships and boats, but, you know, an anchor is pretty important. The purpose of an anchor really is a couple of things, and it's to keep the ship from drifting and also to stabilize the ship in storms and waves, heavy waves. But now what's interesting about that is that, you know, a ship has to be out, it has to be out in deep water. You know, they can't come, you know, depending on the size of the ship, it can't come that close to the shore. So people get out and they take the anchor, you know, and they throw it down and the ship is anchored. And even when the water is calm, if you didn't have that anchor, what would happen? Drift. The natural thing to happen is that the ship would drift. So will your life. If we are not anchored to hope, so will your life. So will my life. Even though there's not storms and waves, if we are not proactive in growing in this hope, and we'll go back over that in just a moment, because the way he says it, he's saying it like it's a progression. You don't automatically have it. It's something you have to grow in. And if we don't, we drift. We don't have to have a storm. We don't have to have heavy waves. We will drift. We have to have an anchor. Here's why. Go back up to verse 11. And the writer of Hebrews has been, you know, kind of, I don't want to use the word hard on his readers, but he's been, the way he's writing, Hebrews has a lot of warnings. Let's put it that way. It has a lot of warnings in it. And we're not going to, you know, get into that right now, but he says this. I'll read from verse 9, but we're going to focus on verse 11. Even though we're speaking to you this way, and like I said, he's just given them a warning. He's just given them a warning about falling away and what that's like, what that looks like, about falling away and the result of that. Even though we're speaking to you this way, dearly loved friends. He's talking to you and me. God is using this. He was talking to his audience, but God is using this to talk to you and I. Dearly loved friends, in your case, we are confident of things, you, Foundation Church, we're confident of things that are better and that pertain to salvation. For God is not unjust. He will not forget your work and the love you demonstrated for his name by serving the saints and by continuing to serve them. You think about the work, the things that have been done as a church. And he's commending us for that. But what about when we feel like giving up? What about when we feel like giving up? Here's what he says about that. Now we desire each of you to demonstrate the same diligence. In other words, don't lose energy while you're doing it. Don't lose focus. Keep the same diligence for the full assurance of your hope until the end. Until the end. Hope is a future thing. It's a future something that we're looking to. Hope is in the future, where faith deals more with now. And, we can read right over in Hebrews chapter 11, faith, faith is the reality of what we hope for and the proof of what's not seen. Faith is the assurance of what we hope for and certain of what we can't see. So that hope is certain and it brings motivation. Here's what he says, until the end, so that you won't become lazy, but will be imitators of those who inherit the promise through faith and perseverance. Live like someone who is inheriting, who believes they're inheriting a promise. Live like someone who believes they're inheriting a promise and that they have a certain hope that is something we can't see yet. It's okay that we haven't seen yet because the things that we can see are nothing to put our hope in, right? Those are so changeable. We don't put our hope in money. We don't put our hope in popularity. We can do those things, we can, but how's that going to come out? How's it going to turn out? Are those things uncertain? Yeah, they can flip. Can't even put our hope in our health. Those things can flip on a dime, right? So the hope that is certain is the hope we haven't yet seen. The tendency for us is to get comfortable. That's why he says, I don't want you to get lazy. I want you to persevere. And to persevere, you have to grow in hope. You have to grow. That's the reason. You have to grow in hope. You have to be able to show it. Peter calls it living hope. Those other things are dead hope. Money and anything else that we can see, dead hope. Peter says this, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, because his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope. Listen to this. Through what? Through the resurrection of Jesus from the dead and into an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading. Guess what? Kept in heaven for you, not by you, kept by God in heaven for you. How much better does it get? It doesn't get any better than that. It doesn't get any more sure than that. So many of us, maybe not in this room, but so many of us as people, especially in this nation, put our hope in government, put our hope in politics, and that's the kind of thing that happens. That's the kind of thing when we lose our hope, we look for the circumstances to change. We look for the circumstances to be better so that we can have hope for a future. That's what culture is doing. That's why it's polarized. That's why, all those things, the politics that people get so deep into. That's what happens. It causes such a divide. If you put your hope in something like that, and that's your foundation, if it doesn't happen that way, what happens? We lose hope. Completely lose hope. We have to put our hope in something better, something bigger than ourselves, something we haven't yet seen. We have the promise that the resurrection from the dead means that Jesus is everything to you that he said he was. So I can tell you for me, that my hope is not in politics. My hope is not in the culture. It doesn't really matter what we want. We get the choice to do things. We get to make choices, but, it's not about that. Our hope, Foundation Church, is not who we put in the White House. Our hope is in the man who went to the cross and then rose again from the dead. That is where our hope is. And our God is all-knowing. So we keep our eyes on that. We keep our eyes on him. We keep our eyes toward the sky looking for his appearing because he is coming. That's our hope. Jesus said something very, very important to his disciples in Luke chapter 18. You don't have, actually, turn there if you can. Turn to Luke chapter 18. I really want to, mark this down because this is a very important thing he said. And, for years I've overlooked this. For years I've overlooked this truth. Especially, with Jesus saying, and this, these are black words, and they, it's not the words in red, not the letters in red, it's the black letters. And, it's just easy to overlook because it's just the starting of a chapter. It's just the beginning of a chapter. But Luke chapter 18, this is the parable of the persistent widow. And so here's what just, really stood out to me, where God moved me. He says this to his disciples. Now he told them a parable on this, the need for them to, one, circle this, if you're one who circles things in your Bible, or write it down. One, pray always. And two, never give up. So pray always and never give up. It tells us right in the beginning, this is why he told them the parable. For the need for them to pray always, and in contrast, never give up. So it's like he's saying that if we don't pray, we have a tendency to give up. All of this began in me personally when Tristan and I started talking about the power of prayer and the need for prayer in our lives. That's one thing that I personally have neglected, over the years. I've neglected it. Just I guess just wanting to be, or being just naturally a self-sufficient person, thinking that I was, and then just, being smacked in the face with it and realizing, what? Come on, dude, you can't. How can you live that way? How can you live without prayer, without connecting with God? He just told us, he told us in Job, and, Job's friend said, those who forget God have no hope. Well, if we don't have a relationship with him, we don't talk to him, how are we going to do that? We can't grow in that hope. Hope doesn't become a reality. We talked about, I was talking with Joseph Flores in college group, and Stephen Forrest in college group about Generation Z, not having a lot of hope. Growing up without hope, the majority of them growing up without hope. It's not like it's not now like it was for a lot of us. There's a lot to be thankful for, growing up in the times that you did, if you're an adult and things like that, because, it was different. It was different. We kind of grew up with hope. Now it's a lot different. There are generations coming up without hope. And Joseph said it this way. He said for them, the lack of motivation, because we were talking about apathy. Talking about apathy that can happen in the church and among the, and among us as believers, how we get apathetic. Like he said, lazy. How we get lazy. What happens is hope is not a reality. Jesus is not a reality. Yeah, we believe. We believe the gospel and we're saved, but the person doesn't become a reality if we don't grow in it. And Joseph said it like this. He said, it's like seeing an awesome piece of scenery, an awesome picture through the screen of my phone. And he just brought that to life for me. He said, but when it's a reality, it's like being there in person. It's a reality. Hope is not I hope so. Hope in the future, the hope that he promised for us, the future that God promises to us who believe, is not something we say we hope for, but I'm not sure. It's an absolute certainty. It's an absolute reality, even though we can't see it. This hope that I'm talking about is no longer a matter of if. It's a matter of when. Where are you in your hope? Where are you with hope? Are you struggling with hope? Struggling to fight another day for hope? God has the answer. Jesus has the answer for us. And I know so many of us who have been in a hopeless situation and have felt hopeless have had people say, do this, do that. But Jesus gives us the truth in the model prayer, our Father, which art in heaven. I know we call that the Lord's Prayer. I call it the model prayer because he was teaching them how to pray. And he says, our Father, which art in heaven. Just that right there. All of those answers, all of the answers, everything we need is in that model prayer. We don't have time to go over it today, but in that model prayer, he gives us everything we need, every piece that we need, if we understand it. Our Father which art in heaven. Do you realize that as a believer, you have been adopted by him and grafted in? Have you ever seen grafting done? Have you ever seen someone graft fruit trees together? That I encourage you to, that is just an amazing thing. It's amazing how it's grafted in and actually becomes a limb, becomes a part of the tree. And that's the language that he uses, that we are adopted and grafted in. Grafted in. Our Father, now you can call him that. We have hope. That's just one part of that prayer. We have hope. Let's seize it. Let's grab that hope. Because what would it look like if we all grabbed that hope? If we could grab it a little bit tighter, maybe just a little bit tighter today. I don't know what that'll look like for you. I don't know. I hope you're thinking about it. I hope you're thinking about it. I have an expectation that we seize it a little bit tighter. Because what would it look like then if we seize hope tighter? And then that hope starts to pour out of us, right? Because, we know that trials cause us to persevere. You know what I'm saying? If we let God use that, it produces that. And perseverance produces character. And then character progresses into hope, right? And hope never disappoints us because God has poured his love into our hearts. He didn't just drip it in there with a dropper. He poured his love into our hearts by the Holy Spirit. So what if our community saw that? The people around us saw that and said, what is it? I want to ask you about the hope that's in you. And what if we're able to give a reason for the hope that's in us? Because they asked, what could God do with that? Oh, it's limitless. If we just grip hope a little bit better. That's how we love, right? Paul said, faith, hope, and love. These three remain, faith, hope, and love. And they're in progression. Faith, and then you grow in hope. Hope is your motivation for love. Think about it. I think we don't think about that enough. Let's consider it today. What does grasping hope look like for you? Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you again for your truth. Help us to be anchored in our souls. Lord, you